Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of Jordan Tremaine Book Reviews, and today we're going to talk about one that I think a lot of people have heard of. I think a lot of people know this author. I don't know if a lot of people have read this book, even though it's like a super bestseller. I'm not sure that bestsellers are always read. Maybe a lot of people buy them, but they don't read them. Anyways, I thought it was worth a read, so I read it, and I want to talk about it, and that book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That's him. So if you've never heard of this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki is a dude that grew up in Hawaii, and his regular biological dad is who in this book he calls his poor dad, and his friend had a dad that he calls his rich dad because he hung out with his friend's dad a lot, and his friend's dad like did father stuff to him, mentored him, and like taught him a lot of things. And I want to stress that in this book, I don't think the author, Robert Kiyosaki, is talking bad about either one of his fathers or good of either one of his fathers, to say like this one's my favorite, that was my favorite. But they both came from like different worldviews, from different backgrounds and different experiences. And it built in them belief systems that they thought were important to teach to their kids. And in this case, it was Robert and his friend. And the lessons that he learned from his biological dad or his poor dad, if he would have followed a lot of those lessons, the idea of this book is he would have ended up poor and like financially poor in the long run while he was an adult. And if he followed the lessons from his rich dad, then he would end up rich. And not that his poor dad is trying to make him poor or make him fail, but his poor dad is telling him what he knows, his rich dad is telling him what he knows. And at the end of the day, certain information is more likely to get you certain places. So in this book, I really like how it is from experience. It's not Robert talking as if he's never done the thing, it's only a theory, here's what you should do even though I've never done it. I don't know if you've ever played sports and had a coach that makes you do a bunch of stuff that he can't physically do, or he or she can't physically do, and maybe he or she was never physically able to do. That's really annoying, to me at least, because it's like, why are you telling me to do this when you don't do this? But Robert is speaking from experience, and he's still doing it today. He's still alive today doing this type of stuff as I'm recording this. So I think that's really cool that you're reading a book from somebody's perspective of somebody that's done it and is still doing it. So I respected that a lot. And I respect him for kind of just opening up and talking about his real life, where the book, talking about Rich Dad and Poor Dad, the rich dad and poor dad, they're not like mythical creatures or made up characters that Robert created. Those are real people. And one of them was his real dad. And he's telling you like how his childhood went and lessons he learned from his real life experiences. So I thought that was really cool. And past that, making this a real story, making this like a legitimate, like I guess, source of advice or something to look to because the person that wrote it actually did it. And I think it was written pretty easy to read and pretty well. It also had some pictures, even though they were graphs. I almost forgot about that. Let me find some. Because there you go, boom. Pictures. So pictures are cool. A lot of times, especially with financial stuff or theory, textbook type of stuff, pictures can help you a lot. So I appreciate that he put in some pictures, and they're pretty simple. You don't need to be like a PhD to understand them. But the thing that I thought was cool about this book is it's talking about like this contrast between two different sets of advice. It's not calling them out as good or bad, but it's saying like in reality, you're gonna get more than one flow of information. You're gonna get confusing, conflicting things you have to deal with, and you're gonna have to sit down and say, well, where do I wanna get to? And what about these things are gonna help me get to that place? I think the perspectives, not necessarily the exact information, but the perspectives that are offered in this book, I think if you can kind of read through the words and look towards the perspective or the mindset that it's coming from, is very beneficial. If you're trying to like lean towards the rich dad side kind of thing. And I think it does a good job of defining things like what wealth is, what greed is. I thought there was a very interesting idea about greed where they bring up this thing called the rat race in this book. And that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but they kind of define it through this idea where you have made purchases or incurred debt to this point where you have to work. You have to go to work and trade your time for money in order to keep up with the debts you've incurred. And you can't grow and prosper because you're constantly trying to get water out of this sinking boat. And that's the rat race. You get trapped in this place where you're just trying to keep your head above water. It talks about why that happens and the mindsets of the type of people that normally fall into that kind of situation, which they call a trap. And Robert talks a lot about fear, which is kind of this main driver as to why people make decisions that aren't necessarily good for them. Where the author, Robert, takes fear and greed and uses those two ideas to paint this picture as to why a lot of people have the ability to be successful, but they don't become successful. And the fear side is people not having knowledge, like financial education. He goes into that being problematic and why it's important to have financial education, but also trying new things, being okay to fail, and training yourself to do new things and be okay with change and learn stuff on a regular basis. And then the greed side, I thought that was very interesting because greed, I think we normally think of as owning way too much stuff and hoarding all this money that other people could be using. But Robert was talking about this kind of death by 1,000 cuts type of greed, where it's on a smaller scale, but it hurts a lot more people, where your greed can keep you from being successful. Where, like, okay, so you work, let's say you work a 9-to-5 job and you get paid once a month, and you get paid on the first of the month. So you get paid, and you have all these bills to pay, and you're having all this anxiety about, like, oh, do I get my bills paid? Can I pay this stuff off? And you spend money on your bills and you pay off your bills, and then you have a little bit of money left over. And now that you have money and you don't have bills due right now, your mind starts going like, well, I still have $100. I can go to the movies. I can get a new pair of shoes. I can I don't know, get my car waxed or detailed. And you're being greedy because you're taking what resources you have, and it's like you have this compulsion, like, I have some money in my checking account, so I need to go spend it, even if it's not a lot of money or the purchases aren't amazingly large purchases. He's talking about greed as this like little thing where it's this desire to have more. Like, why do you need another pair of shoes? Why do you need to go out to eat? Why do you need all these things? And not like those things are bad, but to have this compulsive desire to do that with all of your available capital, he's calling greed. And that keeps a lot of people from being successful, where it's okay to go out to eat. It's okay to get your car detailed. It's okay to go to the movies, but it's also okay to save. It's also okay to invest. It's also okay to teach yourself and learn things. And if you have just this compulsive desire to consume, but you're not growing or giving, then he's calling that greed, no matter on a big scale or a little scale. And he says like that, where on one half of the month, like the late half of the month, when it's coming to the end of the month, you have all this fear because you're like, oh, do I have enough money? Can I afford my bills? What if this happens? Oh, we just had an accident and I don't have $200. Where do I get that? You have all this fear. Then as soon as you get paid, it flips to greed, where you're like, oh, now I have a little bit of money. Let me just spend it on all these things I don't need. And you cycle back between these things, and you never end up getting anywhere because you're being controlled by your emotions. And so I think Robert is trying to identify that, explain that, and give people the idea of why the rat race is a trap, why thinking with your emotions doesn't always help you, and certain strategies, certain mindsets, certain perspectives to help you stop doing that, so that you can be more successful, be more sustainable, have less fear, have less anxiety, and know that you have enough money to pay for an accident. Know that you're saving, you're building something that you can be proud of, that you can have a legacy and things like that. So I thought this book was pretty easy to read. It can be challenging because it may be counter to your mindset. I think there's different types of challenging. Sometimes you read a book and it's challenging because it just doesn't make sense, and it's difficult to understand. It's difficult to read. It's written in a way that's like, why'd you write it like that? But then there's other books that are challenging because of the ideas that they present, and the ideas are challenging to us. They're not hard to understand. Like, you read it and you know what it says, but that idea is hard to accept or hard to entertain. And I think sometimes in this book, that the second one, where the ideas can be challenging to certain people, that I think definitely can be true. I do appreciate this book is the 20th anniversary edition of this book coming out. And at the end of each chapter, it gives a summary of the chapter, so it helps you go over everything that happened again in the chapter. Then it gives some thinking points and some questions. And this book is designed, or at least the 20th anniversary edition is designed for you to read it with someone else and go through those questions and talk and have conversation, which I super appreciate. This book is backed up by like other things just besides the pages. It's encouraging you to meet up with somebody and talk to them about it, to ask questions, to challenge yourself. It's constantly reinforcing this idea of like, this might be challenging, but challenge yourself, try it. And if it is challenging, take a step back and say, why is this so challenging to me just to even read this or just to hear this? Why is it so difficult? And do some reflection. In addition to that, Robert Kiyosaki, this is part of this whole like Rich Dad, Poor Dad universe where there's like board games to play that help you collaborate with other people and create strategies for getting out of the rat race and kind of like help you understand the different things by actually playing and participating. I think that game is called the cash flow game, and there's even one for kids so that you can start teaching kids earlier to not even have to go through this whole like, oh my gosh, I'm caught in the rat race, how do I get out? Let me read this book and start doing this like at 25. Maybe you just teach your kids at 10 and then they never have to go through that. So there's that. There's like online stuff. He does like a podcast, and I appreciate that. He is a dude that he was born into a regular situation, and he had a poor dad, and he found people that helped him to get better. He got better. He continues to get better, and he takes his time and his effort to do things like write books and do podcasts and try to explain to other people ways that they can get better. He's not hoarding all of the knowledge like, oh, I made it, so get away from my stuff. He's not like the dragon sitting on top of all the gold. He's trying to help other people. So I appreciate that from Mr. Kiyosaki. So thank you for writing this book and all that kind of stuff. I think there's some good ideas in here. I think it asks a lot of questions that can be difficult to answer, but it's cool that it encourages participation. It encourages collaboration where not only just read the book, but try things out. Ask yourself questions. Talk to other people. Have a little like book club study group thing. Because the more you do those kind of things, the more you gain skill in it. The more you understand it on a deeper level, and the better, I guess, the information is for you to help impact your life. So the book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This particular copy, as you can see, is the 20th anniversary edition, so it may have some extra stuff aside from the original version. But I like this book. It's got cool stuff in it. It's purple. Purple is a cool color, so I like purple. And yeah, the dude is Robert Kiyosaki. And yeah, it's a book. I say check it out. I enjoyed it. And yeah, this has been another book review by myself, who is Jordan Tremaine. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you guys next time.